My name is Daniel, 48M, and for the past 20 years, I thought I had a solid marriage. My wife, Rebecca, 46F, and I built a life together, 2 kids, a beautiful home, and what I believed was unshakable trust. But let me tell you something. Trust is only real if both people value it. Because while I was working hard to provide for our family, Rebecca was sneaking around with someone much closer than I ever imagined. She wasn't just cheating. She was doing it right next door. The signs were there, but I ignored them. She had been different lately. Not in an obvious way, there were no screaming fights, no major changes. But there was something off. She started caring way too much about how she looked. Even on days when she had nowhere to go, she'd get dressed up like she was meeting someone important. She became secretive with her phone, always angling it away when I walked into the room. If I so much as glanced at it, she'd sigh dramatically and say, "Daniel, you're being paranoid." And then there was the weirdest part. She started spending a lot of time outside. At first, I thought she was just getting fresh air. But then, I noticed something strange. She was always outside at the same time as our neighbor, Brian, 50M. I should have questioned it. I should have asked why she suddenly had so much to talk about with a man who had never been more than a polite acquaintance before. But I didn't, because I was too busy trusting my wife. So when I left for a week-long business trip, I kissed her goodbye, told her I'd miss her, and walked out the door completely unaware that she was about to betray me in the worst way possible. I didn't know it then, but when I came back, everything would be different. I walked through the front door after a week away, expecting the usual. Rebecca greeting me with a smile, maybe a hug, asking how my trip went. Instead, silence. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, acting like I hadn't just walked into the house after being gone for 7 days. "Hey," I said, setting my bag down. She barely looked up. "Oh hey, you're back." Like I had just gone to the grocery store. That was my first clue. The second clue came when I leaned in to kiss her. She turned her face away. I froze for a second, caught off guard. She laughed awkwardly and mumbled something about being tired. Tired of what? She had been home all week. My gut twisted, but I brushed it off. I didn't want to be that guy, the husband who gets paranoid over nothing. So I let it go, until I noticed the third clue. I went upstairs to unpack, and that's when I saw it. My pillow? Moved. The sheets? Different from the ones I left. At first, I thought maybe she had just washed them. But then I opened my closet, and I noticed something else. One of my shirts was missing. A shirt I never wear. A shirt that Rebecca always said looked good on me. Why would it be missing? And then I saw the worst clue of all. A small, barely noticeable dent on my side of the bed. Like someone had been lying there. Someone who wasn't me. I stepped back, my heart pounding. Was I imagining things? Was I reading too much into this? I needed to clear my head. So I did what I always did when I needed to think. I stepped outside onto the porch. And that's when I saw him, Brian, our neighbor, standing in his yard, smirking at me, like he knew something I didn't. And in that moment I knew. Something had happened while I was gone. And I was about to find out exactly what. I stood there, frozen on the porch, staring at Brian, my neighbor, the man who had lived next door for nearly 5 years. A guy I had barbecued with, shared small talk with, even loaned tools to when he needed them. And now, he was standing there, smirking at me, like I was the last one in the room to get the joke. I didn't say anything. I just stared, waiting, daring him to be the one to break first. After a few seconds, he gave me a slow nod. Not a friendly nod, not a casual greeting, but the kind of nod that says, "I know something you don't." And then he turned and walked inside his house, like he had nothing to be guilty about, like I didn't exist. The first crack in her story. I turned back toward my house, my pulse hammering. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't just a weird feeling. Something wasn't right. And now I was going to get my answers. I walked back inside, closing the door behind me. Rebecca was still glued to her phone, acting like I hadn't just walked into our house after a week away. "Who were you texting?" I asked, She barely glanced up. What? Your phone. You've been staring at it since I got home. She sighed loudly, like I was bothering her. Relax, Daniel. It's just Sarah. Sarah, her best friend. The one she always used as a cover when she was out late. I pulled my phone out and texted Sarah myself. Hey, hope you're doing well. Just got back from my trip. Rebecca says you two have been chatting a lot this week. I hit send and waited. Less than 10 seconds later, Sarah replied. Huh? I haven't talked to Rebecca in almost 2 weeks. How was your trip? The first lie exposed. I clenched my jaw, keeping my face neutral. Rebecca was still scrolling on her phone, completely unaware of what I had just found out. So, what did Sarah say? I asked. She blinked. What? You just said you were texting Sarah. What did she say? Rebecca hesitated for half a second too long. Then she forced a laugh. Oh, nothing important. Just catching up.
Ist hier.
She had no idea I had already caught her in the first lie. I pocketed my phone, nodding slowly. Good to know. Now I just needed to find out the rest. Strange movements in the night. That night I didn't sleep. Rebecca acted normal, like nothing was wrong, but my gut told me otherwise. I needed proof. Real proof. So I waited. Around 2 a.m., I heard her phone buzz. She reached over quickly, grabbing it off the nightstand. Then, instead of answering, she got up and left the room. I waited 30 seconds, then followed. She was in the kitchen, whispering into the phone. I told you I'd handle it. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just give it some time. Pause. I know, but we have to be careful now. Another pause. Look, I'll come over tomorrow. Just act normal. Okay? She hung up, sighing. Then, she turned around and saw me standing there. The confrontation. Rebecca's face went pale. Jesus, Daniel. You scared me. She snapped, clutching her chest. Who were you talking to? I asked, keeping my voice calm. She hesitated. Then she forced a laugh. Oh, just Sarah again. She's going through some stuff. Lie number 2. Funny, I said. I texted Sarah earlier. She said she hasn't talked to you in 2 weeks. Silence. Rebecca blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then she scoffed. Wow, Daniel, you're spying on me now? That's really pathetic. She was gaslighting me, trying to flip the blame onto me. I crossed my arms. Who were you talking to? She rolled her eyes, playing annoyed. Ah, fine. It was just my cousin. She needed advice about something. Lie number 3. I was done playing games. Don't lie to me, Rebecca. Her expression hardened. Drop it, Daniel. And then, she walked right past me and went back to bed, like she had nothing to explain. The breaking point. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I needed real proof. So while Rebecca was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. She never let me touch it. But today, I didn't care. I opened her messages. There were no texts from Brian. In fact, there were no suspicious messages at all, because she had deleted them. But what she forgot was that her location history was still active. I opened the app, scrolling through the past week. And there it was. Multiple trips next door. The times when she thought I wouldn't notice. And the worst part? One of the visits was at 2 a.m. while I was asleep, in our house. The truth I couldn't ignore. I put the phone down, staring at the wall. There was no denying it now. Rebecca had been sneaking over to Brian's house. At night, while I was gone, while I was home, while I was asleep in the next room. And Brian? He had been smirking at me for a reason. Because he knew. And now? So did I. The moment of decision. I heard the water shut off in the bathroom. Rebecca would come out in a few minutes, acting normal, thinking she had gotten away with it. But she had no idea. Because when she walked out of that bathroom, she wasn't coming back to the same life. Everything was about to change. I sat on the edge of the bed, Rebecca's phone still in my hand. My mind was racing. The evidence was right there. Multiple late-night trips to Brian's house. Lies on top of lies. A secret phone call at 2 a.m. And now, I had a choice. I could wait, Pretend I didn't know. Gather more proof. Or, I could confront her right now. The bathroom door creaked open. Rebecca walked out, drying her hair with a towel. She saw me sitting there and froze. Then, she noticed her phone in my hand. Her face went pale. "Daniel, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice way too casual. I held up the screen, showing her the location history. "Care to explain why you've been sneaking over to Brian's house at 2 a.m.? Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then, she scoffed and shook her head, playing it off. "Are you seriously tracking me now? That's really creepy, Daniel." There it was. Instead of explaining, she tried to flip it on me. I kept my voice calm and steady. "Just answer the question, Rebecca." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Daniel. It's not what you think." I raised an eyebrow. "So, you're telling me there's a good reason for sneaking into another man's house in the middle of the night?" She crossed her arms. "I wasn't sneaking. We're friends. Sometimes I go over there to talk." I let out a short laugh. "At 2 in the morning? Yes. Brian's going through a rough time, and I was being a good neighbor. Unlike you, who's always gone." There it was. Blaming me. I nodded slowly. "Got it. So what did you two talk about at 2 a.m.? Must have been important." She hesitated. Then she huffed. "I don't have to explain myself to you, Daniel." Wrong answer. The second lie falls apart. I stood up, walking closer. "You were on the phone with him last night, weren't you?" Her jaw clenched. "I told you, I was talking to Sarah." I pulled out my phone. "I texted Sarah. She hasn't talked to you in 2 weeks." Rebecca's face twisted. Her web of lies was unraveling. But instead of confessing, she doubled down. "Why are you interrogating me like this? You're acting crazy." I shook my head.
No, Rebecca.
"Crazy is thinking you could sneak around and not get caught." She glared at me, arms crossed, breathing heavier now. "Fine. You want the truth?" she snapped. "Yes, actually. That would be refreshing." She let out a bitter laugh. "Brian and I have been talking a lot lately because, unlike you, he actually listens to me." "Oh, is that what we're calling it now?" I said coldly. "I needed someone to talk to, Daniel." She shot back.
Is Sarah here?
"And did you talk to him in our bed?" Her face turned red. "Screw you, Daniel." Bingo. She finally slips. Rebecca was a good liar. But not good enough. She had just confirmed everything. I took a deep breath, my hands tightening into fists. "So that's it then? You cheated on me with our neighbor while I was out working to support this family." She shook her head furiously. "It wasn't like that." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh? Then how was it?" She pressed her lips together, searching for an excuse. And then, she came up with the worst one possible. "If you weren't always traveling, maybe I wouldn't have needed someone else." The excuse that broke me. I took a slow, deep breath. She really just said that. I had spent years busting my back for our family. I worked long hours, late nights, and out-of-town trips so we could have a good life. So she wouldn't have to worry about money. And now, she was using that against me? I let out a cold, humorless laugh. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice deadly calm. "You decided to cheat on me because I was too busy providing for you?" She had no response. Because there was no response. The beginning of the end. I stepped back, shaking my head. "You know what, Rebecca? I'm done." Her eyes widened. "Wait, what?" "You heard me. I'm done. I'm not playing this game with you." "Daniel, come on."
No.
"You don't get to cry your way out of this. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Her mouth opened and closed. For the first time, she looked scared. Because she realized this wasn't just a fight. This was the moment when everything changed. And there was no going back. Rebecca just stood there, stunned. As my words sank in. "You're overreacting, Daniel." Her voice was sharp, but there was a hint of panic underneath. I shook my head.
No, Rebecca.
Overreacting would be throwing your stuff in the yard and setting it on fire. This is just me finally seeing you for who you are. She blinked rapidly, her face twisting into an expression of pure frustration. So what? You're just gonna end our marriage over some dumb mistake? I laughed. Cold, humorless laugh. A mistake is burning dinner, Rebecca. Sleeping with our neighbor? That's a decision. She huffed, crossing her arms. You act like you're perfect, Daniel. Like you never ignored me or made me feel unwanted. I stared at her, feeling an eerie sense of calm wash over me. You weren't unwanted, Rebecca. You were ungrateful. Her face turned red. She knew she had lost. But instead of owning up, she did what she always did. She lashed out, the attempt to flip the script. So that's it, she snapped. You're just giving up on us?
No, Rebecca.
You gave up on us the second you walked into Brian's house at 2 a.m. She let out an angry, bitter laugh. Oh, please. Like you haven't been emotionally cheating on me with your job for years. I tilted my head. So, let me get this straight. You cheated because I was working too hard to give you a comfortable life? That's your excuse. She threw her hands in the air. You never paid attention to me, Daniel. What was I supposed to do? I scoffed. I don't know. Maybe not sleep with our married neighbor? That shut her up real fast. Her jaw clenched. Because, for all her deflections, for all her excuses, there was nothing she could say to justify what she did. And she knew it. The final blow. I'll send you the divorce papers tomorrow, I said. Her head snapped up. Wait, what? I'm done, Rebecca. Her entire demeanor changed. The anger vanished, replaced by something else. Panic. You're not serious. Daniel, come on, we can fix this. No, we can't. She took a step forward, reaching for my arm. Don't throw away 20 years over. Over what? I snapped. Over a fling? Over just talking? Or over the fact that you knew exactly what you were doing and did it anyway? She swallowed hard. She knew. She knew I had caught her completely. Daniel, please, let's talk about this. We just did. And now I'm done. I grabbed my keys, walking toward the door. Her voice shook as she spoke again. Where are you going? Anywhere but here. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't yell. Because I didn't need to. She had already lost. And now she was finally realizing it. I walked out that door feeling lighter than I had in years. But I wasn't naive. I knew Rebecca wasn't done yet. Women like her, the ones who thrive on control, on having the upper hand, they don't just let things go. They fight. They manipulate. And I was about to witness just how low she was willing to go. I drove around for a while, letting the cool night air clear my head. It was surreal. One moment I had a wife, a home, a 20-year marriage. The next, I had nothing but clarity. I wasn't sad. I wasn't heartbroken. I was done. I parked in an empty lot and pulled out my phone. First things first, I called my lawyer. Daniel? It's late. Is everything okay? Yeah. I need to file for divorce. Fast. There was a pause. I see. Did something happen? Yeah. My wife happened. She sighed. All right, let's schedule a meeting first thing in the morning. Don't do anything drastic yet. Just breathe. Trust me. I'm breathing just fine. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The meltdown begins. I got back home a few hours later, prepared for anything. I expected anger, screaming, more excuses. What I didn't expect. Rebecca sitting on the couch, crying. Her face was puffy, her eyes red, her whole body shaking. And for a split second, I felt something almost like pity. Almost. She looked up at me, sniffling. I can't lose you, Daniel. I stared at her, arms crossed. You already did. Her lip trembled. I messed up. I know I did. But please, please don't throw everything away. We can fix this. I laughed. A short, bitter laugh. Fix it? Rebecca, you weren't crying when you were sneaking into Brian's house at 2 a.m. She winced. I wasn't thinking. No, you were thinking just fine. You just didn't think you'd get caught. She stood up suddenly, her tears vanishing like they had been an act all along. Fine. You want a divorce? Then I want half. I tilted my head. Half of what? Half of everything, Daniel. The house. The savings. Everything. I smiled. You should have read the prenup. The turning point. Rebecca's face twisted. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and opened the document. Right here, I said, scrolling. Signed 20 years ago. In the event of infidelity, the cheating party gets nothing. Her entire body stiffened. You wouldn't do that to me. Oh, I absolutely would. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Daniel, please don't do this. I made a mistake, but I don't deserve to be left with nothing. I gently pulled my arm away. Rebecca, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. Now you get to live with it. Her eyes darkened. She wasn't playing the heartbroken wife anymore. Now she was furious. You think you're gonna just walk away and win? She hissed. I don't think, Rebecca. I know. And I walked upstairs. She didn't follow, because she finally understood. She had lost. The unexpected twist. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd accept defeat and start planning her exit. But I was wrong, because Rebecca wasn't done ruining things yet. And the next morning, I woke up to a text message from Brian's wife. We need to talk. Now. I stared at the text from Brian's wife, Laura, 44F. We need to talk. Now. My heart pounded. Because if she knew, that meant everything was about to explode. I quickly responded, where do you want to meet? Seconds later, my phone buzzed again. Your house. I'm already outside. I rushed to the window and pulled back the curtain. There she was, standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, her face unreadable. I took a deep breath and walked outside. She didn't waste time. So, how long have you known? She asked, voice tight. I sighed. I figured it out last night. You? She let out a bitter laugh. 2 days ago. But I wasn't sure until now. How did you find out? Her eyes darkened. A text message. A mistake. And Brian being the worst liar I've ever met. I frowned. A mistake. She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. I looked down at the screen. A text from Rebecca. Rebecca. I can't wait to see you again tonight, Redheart. Brian. You have to stop texting me on this phone. My wife almost saw last time. Rebecca. Relax. Daniel is clueless. I clenched my jaw. She really thought she'd never get caught. Laura scoffed. She also thought my idiot husband would be smart enough to delete messages. But here we are. The plan to expose them. I handed her phone back. So what now? I asked. Laura's face hardened. I want revenge. I nodded slowly. Me too. She smirked. Good. Because I have an idea. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of idea? She glanced toward my house. We make them confess. In the worst way possible. The setup. Laura had a plan. And it was brilliant. That night, she invited Brian to dinner. Meanwhile, I told Rebecca we needed to talk things through. What they didn't know. We had set up hidden cameras in both houses. We wanted proof. Not just for ourselves, but for the divorce settlements. And the moment of truth was about to arrive. The trap is set. Rebecca and Brian sat across from us, looking nervous. They knew something was off. Why are we doing this? Brian asked, eyeing Laura suspiciously. Because we want honesty, she said sweetly. Isn't that what marriage is built on? Rebecca forced a smile. Of course. Laura and I shared a glance. And then, we sprung the trap. So, I said, looking straight at Brian. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? Silence. For a full 5 seconds, nobody moved. Rebecca's fork hovered in midair. Brian's drink sat untouched on the table. And then, they panicked. What the hell are you talking about? Brian scoffed, forcing a laugh. Sleeping with your wife? Are you serious? Rebecca jumped in, shaking her head way too fast. Daniel, this is insane. You're seriously accusing me of this? Me? After 20 years. Laura leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Yes, Rebecca. After 20 years. That's exactly what we're saying. Rebecca's face flushed red, and she threw down her napkin. I don't have to sit here and be accused of something I didn't do. She stood up, ready to storm out. And that's when I pulled out my phone. The proof they couldn't deny. Sit down, I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. She hesitated. Something in my tone must have scared her. Brian looked between us, his fingers tightening around his fork. What's that? He asked, nodding toward my phone. I unlocked it. Just a little something Laura and I put together. I tapped the screen. And then the recording played. Rebecca's voice came through the speaker first. I told you I'd handle it. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just give it some time. A pause. Then Brian's voice. I know, but we have to be careful now. Rebecca again. Look, I'll come over tomorrow. Just act normal. Okay? Silence. I looked up from the phone. And for the first time, Rebecca and Brian had nothing to say. They just sat there, completely frozen. The final blow. Laura smirked. Still want to lie? She asked. Brian swallowed hard. That could be about anything. I chuckled. Sure. Except it's not. I clicked on another file. This time, it was security footage. Rebecca and Brian, standing outside his house at 2 a.m., his hand on her waist, her leaning in just a little too close, the look of guilt on their faces when they thought nobody was watching. I watched as Rebecca's eyes widened in horror, and that's when she snapped. Her true colors show. Are you serious, Daniel? You spied on me? This is sick. I tilted my head. Sick? Rebecca. What's sick is you sneaking into Brian's house while I was asleep. Laura leaned back in her chair, enjoying the show. I don't know, she said sweetly. I think it's poetic justice. Brian turned to Rebecca, his face twisted with panic. I told you to delete those messages, he hissed. Rebecca whipped around, her expression furious. Oh, so now this is MY fault? They started bickering right in front of us, blaming each other. Laura and I, we just watched, because we had already won. The collapse of their lies. Brian ran a hand through his hair, completely unraveling. All right, fine. Yes. Okay? We messed up. But you guys don't have to act like saints. Laura raised an eyebrow. Oh? Who exactly did we cheat on? Brian had no answer. Rebecca tried one last time to salvage the situation. She reached for my hand, her eyes glossy with fake tears. Daniel, please, let's talk about this privately. I pulled my hand away. Rebecca, there's nothing left to talk about. Her face crumpled, because for the first time she realized I was actually leaving. The final words. I stood up. This marriage is over. Laura stood too, looking at Brian with pure disgust. And so is ours. Brian ran a hand down his face, muttering curses under his breath. Rebecca just sat there, staring at me, begging with her eyes. Daniel, don't do this. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I was finally free. I already did. And with that, Laura and I walked away, leaving them to destroy each other. Rebecca and Brian had no idea what hit them. When Laura and I walked out of that room, we left them drowning in the mess they created. But this wasn't just about confronting them. This was about making sure they felt the full weight of what they had done. And trust me, I wasn't done yet. Step 1. Kicking Rebecca out. The next morning, I made a few calls. My lawyer was already drafting divorce papers. But I wanted Rebecca out of my house immediately. So I had her served with a formal notice. She had 7 days to leave. When she saw the papers, she lost it. You can't do this, Daniel, she screamed, waving them in my face. Actually, I can, I said calmly. I own the house. You broke the prenup. So yes, I can. Her eyes filled with tears of rage. I have nowhere to go, she cried. Not my problem, I said. She opened her mouth to argue, but then she froze, because in that moment, she realized I wasn't playing games anymore. Step 2. Exposing Brian. Laura had her own plans for Brian. She filed for divorce the same day. But she didn't stop there. She went to his workplace, a respected law firm, and leaked the affair to his colleagues. When his boss found out, Brian got fired on the spot. And just like that, he lost everything. Step 3, the social fallout. Rebecca always cared about her reputation. She thrived on being the perfect wife, the perfect neighbor, the perfect friend. So Laura and I made sure everyone knew the truth. We sent out one simple message to friends and family. Just wanted to let everyone know that Rebecca and Brian were having an affair behind our backs. We're both moving on, but if you still want to associate with them, that's your choice. The reaction? Brutal. Her so-called friends dropped her instantly. Brian's own kids refused to talk to him. They weren't just exposed. They were socially exiled. The last conversation. A week later, Rebecca stood at the door with her bags packed. Her once proud face looked hollow, defeated. "This is really it, huh?" she whispered. I nodded. "Yep." She swallowed hard. "Do you think we could have worked through it?" I laughed. A short, sharp laugh.
No, Rebecca.
"Because you didn't just cheat. You destroyed everything we built." A tear slid down her cheek. "I never thought you'd actually leave me." I met her eyes. "That's the problem. You never thought I'd find out either." She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. Then, she sighed, and walked out the door. For good. The turning point. That night, Laura and I went out for drinks. We sat at a rooftop bar, watching the city lights. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. She raised her glass. "To new beginnings?" she asked. I smiled. "To never settling for less again." We clinked glasses. And just like that, we moved forward. Without them, life was finally settling down. Rebecca was gone. Brian was jobless and humiliated. Laura and I, we were rebuilding. For the first time in 20 years, I woke up feeling at peace. But just when I thought the storm had passed, a new problem appeared. And this time, it was something I never saw coming. The late-night phone call. I was sitting in my living room, enjoying a drink, when my phone rang. I frowned. It was almost midnight. I picked up. "Hello." A shaky voice came through the line. "Daniel." "It's me, Rebecca." I nearly hung up. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. She sniffled. I need your help." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You're joking, right?" "Daniel, please," she whispered. "I have nowhere to go. I made a mistake. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. She was homeless. She had no friends left. And now she was calling me. The man she had betrayed. The offer I never expected. I sighed. "What do you expect me to do, Rebecca?" There was a long pause. Then, in a small, broken voice, she said, "Can I come back?" I almost dropped my phone. "Come back? To this house? To me? I swear, Daniel, I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes." I sat there, gripping my glass, staring at the wall. She was serious. After everything, she really thought I'd take her back. And I had two options. One, I could unleash every bit of anger I still had inside me. Or, two, I could make sure she truly understood what she had lost. I chose the second. The final conversation. "Rebecca," I said, my voice calm. "Let me ask you something." "Anything," she whispered. "Do you remember that night? The night I caught you?" She swallowed hard. "Yes." "Do you remember when you blamed me? When you said it was my fault?" "Daniel, please." "No, answer the question. Do you remember?" Silence. Then, a quiet, broken, "Yes." I nodded. "Then you understand why I don't care." Her breath hitched. "You don't mean that."
Oh, Ido.
I stood up, looking out my window at the dark street. "You made your choice, Rebecca. Now live with it." She let out a shaky sob. "So this is it? You won't even help me?" I smiled. "I already did. I let you go." And then, I hung up. For the last time. Moving forward, for real this time. I stared at my phone for a few moments. Waiting. Wondering if she'd call back. But she didn't. And I knew, in that moment, that I was finally free. The final chapter begins. The next morning I called Laura. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Lighter," I admitted. She chuckled. "Good. So what's next?" I thought about it. For the first time in years, my life was mine again. No more betrayal. No more lies. Just possibilities. I smiled. Anything I want. Rebecca never called back. And that was fine by me. She had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. But for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about me, what I wanted, where I was going. And for the first time, the future looked good. A call that changed everything. A week later, I got another call. But this time, it wasn't from Rebecca. It was from Laura. "Hey," she said, her voice lighter than I had ever heard it. "Hey yourself," I said, leaning back on my couch. "How's freedom treating you?" She laughed. "Better than I ever expected." "You?" "Same." There was a pause. Then, she cleared her throat. "So, I was thinking, we never really celebrated." "Celebrated what?" "Our escape." I grinned. "You have something in mind?" She hesitated. "Dinner?" "Nothing serious. Just two people who survived hell raising a glass to new beginnings." I thought about it for half a second. Then I smiled. "Sounds like a plan." The night that felt different. A few nights later, we met for dinner at a small restaurant downtown. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't romantic. But it felt right. We talked about everything. Our exes, our regrets, our plans for the future. Halfway through, Laura shook her head, laughing. "You know what's crazy?" she said, sipping her wine. "What?" "A few months ago, I thought Brian was my forever." I nodded. "Same with Rebecca." She smiled, a little sad, a little amused. "And now, I feel like I dodged a bullet." I raised my glass. "To dodging bullets." She clinked hers against mine. "To never settling again." And just like that, everything changed. The unexpected realization. After dinner, we walked outside, the city buzzing around us. We stood there for a moment, just enjoying the quiet. Then, Laura turned to me. "So what now?" I met her gaze. "Now, we start over. On our own terms." She studied me for a second. Then, she smiled. "I think I like that idea." And as I watched her walk away, I realized something. I wasn't just free from Rebecca. I was finally free to live. And whatever came next, I was ready. Life after betrayal isn't just about moving on. It's about rebuilding. At first, I thought healing would take years, that I'd be bitter, that the weight of what Rebecca did would always be in the back of my mind. But as the weeks went by, I realized something important. I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about me. And for the first time in decades, that wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Rebecca's final message. One night, while I was reading in bed, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. But I knew who it was. I hesitated, then opened the message. "Rebecca? I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you're happy, Daniel. You deserve to be." I stared at the screen. Not angry. Not sad. Just done. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She had made her choices. And now she had to live with them. I set my phone down and went to sleep. Without a second thought. A fresh start. A few days later, I met Laura for lunch. Not as two people recovering from a nightmare. Just as two people. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her. "You seem lighter," I said, sipping my coffee. She grinned. "That's because I am." "You?" I nodded. "Yeah. Feels good. Doesn't it?" She smirked. "Better than good." I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because I was genuinely happy. For the first time in years. The road ahead. As I walked out of the cafe that day, something hit me. I had spent so long thinking my life was set in stone. That my marriage, my future, my entire existence was already written. But that was a lie. The truth? Nothing was set in stone. Everything was still ahead of me, and I was finally free to live it on my own terms, with or without anyone else. Because at the end of the day, I had myself, and that was enough. Months had passed since the day I walked away from Rebecca for good. And in that time, I had come to one simple but powerful realization. My past did not define my future. For 20 years, I had built a life around someone who never truly valued me. I had given my all to a marriage that, in the end, had been built on nothing but my effort. But now, I was finally free, not just from Rebecca, not just from the betrayal, but from the version of myself that had accepted less than I deserved. Rebecca's fate. I never responded to Rebecca's last message. I didn't need to. I heard through the grapevine that Brian had left town. Fired, divorced, ruined. And Rebecca? She had moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. From what I heard, she was struggling. Not financially, she still had a job. But socially, she had no one left. The friends she once bragged to had all distanced themselves. People saw her for who she really was. And that was her real punishment. Because Rebecca wasn't just someone who needed love. She was someone who needed an audience. And now, she had none. Laura and I, a new path. Laura and I stayed in touch. We grabbed dinner here and there, caught up over drinks, supported each other. But neither of us were in a rush for anything. We both knew one thing for sure. We weren't going to settle again. Whatever happened, happened. But for now, we were just two people who had escaped something toxic. And that was enough. The lesson of it all. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's this. You don't truly know someone until you see what they do when they think they won't get caught. Love is about actions, not words. Someone who values you will never put you in a position to question their loyalty. Walking away is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. It doesn't mean you lost. It means you refused to keep losing. At the end of the day, Rebecca thought she was invincible. She thought I'd never leave. She thought I'd always be there, waiting, forgiving, accepting less. She was wrong. I left. I moved on. And now, I'm happier than ever. Because I didn't lose a wife. I lost a liar. And I gained something far more valuable. Myself. The end. Fire final thoughts. This is your story now. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt like you were stuck in something toxic, just know, you can walk away. You can rebuild. And one day you'll look back and realize, leaving was the best decision you ever made. Thanks for reading. Stay strong. Flex biceps fire.